as well,
Yep.
and a very good one. So we're going to be talking about what's going on in the market today as far as Stacey's data is concerned, because he collects all sorts of data, and I think that's probably a great place for us to start. Is help people understand what kind of data is it that you collect.
Yeah, well, appraisers by definition are data hunter-gatherers.
Right.
So that's what we do. Fortunately, our MLS, in spite of what's gone on in the last month with their transition into a whole bunch of different platforms and all that stuff, is really, compared to other MLSs around the country, is really, really good. The data that is entered is really, really good. The people that are checking it is really, really good. Now, is it perfect? No. But remember that humans enter data and humans are going to make mistakes.
Right.
So it's just a question of that. So essentially what I do is the MLS database is my #1 source, but then, Wake County's got a couple great resources. And now we got some national sites that are pretty good in terms of stuff like that. So the job compared to where it was 30 years ago in terms of data hunter gathering, which was very time intensive back then, is now very, you can get a lot of stuff. And in a numbers world, the more numbers that you have, the better your results are.
I just lost my microphone. I'm not sure why, but I did. Anyway, it's not important because it seems to be working everywhere else. So I'm seeing myself here. So as long as I see myself here, that's all that matters. So specifically, the type of data that you're looking at, is it more than just housing data? Do you look at jobs data? What kind of things are you looking at?
So from an appraisal world, we look at, it's called macroeconomic data and microeconomic data. So macro is the big picture stuff. And I think that's one of the things that I've tried to convey to my subscribers. And any chance I get to speak to people is that most real estate agents are in their little old micro bubble in their specific geographic neighborhood, not really paying attention to what's going on from a national standpoint. But 85% of house purchases are with a mortgage, which is somebody else's money. And so all the economics that go behind setting those mortgage rates are things that people need to pay attention to. So it's employment, workforce, unemployment, all the things, what the stock market's doing, what house prices are doing, what wages are super important, what Jay Powell's saying.
Right.
It's all very, very, very important. So I encourage everybody that's listening to have at least 1 or 2 national economic sources that I think they're in a bubble, but they're not.
Right.
And look, the majority of us have consumed the Kool-Aid here, and so we really think that the economics of here are better than anywhere else, which is true to some extent, but it doesn't mean that we're immune from stuff. So you can read, there've been layoffs here, there's been job creation, there's been layoffs. So all that stuff is super important for appraisers and agents to pay attention to.
Do you do any sort of comparison between like our market area and other markets areas at all?
Just in terms of prices, one of the examples I use, because Apple's projected to come in here and be a major employer. So I've done a couple examples of Mr. and Mrs. Apple coming here from Northern California. And, one of the things that the natives here, and I'm almost one, being here for almost 40 years, we just look at it. Oh my gosh, these house prices start. I mean, around Linda's office, I mean, this was starter home heaven. I mean, you could get a detached single family house for about $80,000. My first condo about a mile away from here was $45,000. So we're going, how did we go from that to an average sales price of $540,000 in the 4 main counties around here? Well, the big part of it is that a lot of people from out of town moved in here. So whether it's Northern California money or New York City money or Chicago money or Boston money or South Florida money or Atlanta money, they're all coming in here. So, and then when I travel, I look at the housing around there. So I love looking at houses. It's kind of stuff still why I do it. And, they've got whole giant subdivisions where there's nothing under $1 million in DC, in Boston and Chicago. We are not there yet. So that's really that's really the comparison that I do in terms of that. And that's one of the attractions of people coming here. Hey, I can move from Northern California to Raleigh and I could get a house for, 60% or 40% less and then roll with that. And then the other thing that's really helped that is work from home. It's
Right.
enabled more people to do that.
Right. All right. So let's talk about some of the specific data. Let's take a look at. And in terms of what you're seeing, housing prices from, because we're now in the last quarter, from first quarter to last quarter, what has been the data showing in terms of housing prices?
Overall up 8%.
Okay.
Resale up about 6 to 7%. So it's really the first economic cycle that I've been around for 35 years where interest rates have gone up and house prices have gone up too. And that is specifically related to the severe undersupply of housing that we have in our market. So it really, and it's like, okay, everybody's screaming about housing affordability. And it's like, that's what's happening is that people are moving here with a lot of money and, a $500,000 house for somebody in Northern California is like a starter house there. Maybe probably isn't even a starter house. It's probably a tear down. So they come here and they see our houses and they just go, wow.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Give me two.
Let me buy two of them.
It's a BOGO.
Yeah, I get it. So, all right. So what about the rental market? Okay, do you have data on that when it comes to the rental market?
Yeah, well, we're struggling with that from MLS with the transition that we're doing is to getting and so I'm assuming most people are listening to this are aware of the issues with MLS. So what we're trying to do is there's this big real estate standards organization called RESO. We have not had data fields in our MLS that matched up with it. So that's one of the issues that we've had is getting our data matched up with that. So the rental aspect, we're still working on getting that thing straightened up. But the big trend for rental is build for rent for national home builders. They are building. They'll start out proposing a subdivision, say 50, 75, 100 houses, and then one of the national real estate organizations or one of the national rental organizations that own single family houses will come in and say, hey, I want to buy all these houses in there. And if you're a home builder, you can say you can make 100 sales at once versus 100 sales over a year or two. You're going to take it. So that's really the biggest trend that I've observed with that over the past 2 years is the velocity of that happening. It was really, prior to 5 years ago and prior, I never really heard of that or people weren't really doing it. But now, and I think one of the things is that low interest rates, people are always looking for yield. Large pools of money are always looking for yield. Single family rentals are a really good source for that. And so that's where we're seeing that.
Yeah. I don't know if this is a trend. I've seen something recently, so help me understand this, where that there have been developers who have wanted to build apartment complexes, but then they've recently have pulled out of the market. They've stopped. And I don't know if that's something you're seeing at all, but I've noticed this just happened right behind our house.
Right.
And then I heard of a couple others and I asked the developer because I got to know them. I said, why did you do it? And they said, well, economically, it wasn't making sense right now. And I was wondering if that's been a trend with apartment complexes.
Well, there's two things, and that's not necessarily my expertise, but I do read up on it. So a couple things with the apartment deal is that the cost to construct and entitle those apartments keeps going up, and the rental market is kind of stagnated, and in some cases gone down a little bit. So you do this, you say, and look, if you're going to build an apartment complex, you're probably 2 years, 3 years from entitlement to completion to getting that first rent check, and good luck predicting what's going to happen 3 years from now. So these decisions were probably made 2 or 3 years ago, and then they get to the point where you go out and you bid for contracts, and they say, this doesn't work anymore. And really, that also is the banks. So the banks are more apartment complex or the construction of apartments is really more dependent on bank financing, and they're pulling back on that. So that'd be my answer to that.
Well, it makes sense because it's consistent with what this developer told me, and in particular, because first of all, it was going to take a minimum of 2 years to build out. That's not even counting the first rent check.
Right.
it was 2 years just to build out, right? Where you can get it all done. So when we start seeing this, and they kept saying, you know, this was not, you know, there was unpredictability and in the market, and the financing wasn't making sense, you know, in terms of what we were going to do. We just felt it was safer for us to pull out at this time. So that's
after spending that money,
right. Well, which, by the way, they spent a lot of money to get to this point, because they were you know, about to get to approved through the city council. I mean, they've already been approved by the first 7 of the commissioners. So it was 7-0. They were voted in. Now they're going to go before the city council, which is probably pretty assured, because very rarely do we ever see you get approved by 7-0 as a commission. And then, and then they pulled out. They didn't go to the city council. So how much money did you, I mean, I can't even imagine that you've lost in that. And then I've subsequently read where other developers doing apartments have pulled out as well.
Well, it's the famous banking philosophy: if you're in a hole, stop digging. So, right. So that's what they're doing. That's what they're doing.
So what are we seeing in the triangle in terms of the job market? What are some of the things that you're seeing here?
Look, we're blessed. It's phenomenal. I mean, we still have more people. I don't know what the number is. Is it 50 more people a day? 75?
Well,
I mean, the number.
Here's what you told me the last time we were together. And because I asked you specifically, how many people a day? And you go, you know, you said to me, you know, everybody wants to say, you know, how many ever people a day. Here's what I could tell you. This is the quote. I'm quoting Stacey here now. Quote, I could tell you this. There's more people here moving in than there are moving out.
Still true. Now, whether that number is 1, 25, 50, or 100, it's whatever you want to do to make us look really good. But we have net population growth, and that's something that you want to strive. Like when you're in government, you want to have more people moving in than moving out. The downside of that is you always want to have shelter for them, and that's the issue. And look, it's not unique. You can go to Austin, Texas. You can go to Orlando. You can go to Phoenix. You know, a lot of places where Sunbelt cities where you have population growth, net population growth, they just can't keep up with shelter. Now your next question is, why? What's the problem?
What's the problem?
What's the problem?
What's the problem with shelter?
You and I are the problem. The boomers. The boomers will not. They're not giving off their house. So first, there's a couple things with that.
But where do they go?
That's question number one, right? So that's the issue. So question number one that the boomers have is, where do they go? And so there's really not many alternatives from a single family house to do to. So you either go into a townhouse or a condo, and you're going, oh my gosh, I lived in a house all the year. I don't really want to do that. The bigger thing we've got going on here is we've got some phenomenal assisted living places. Searstone and Glen Eyre and Cary. North Raleigh was really the start of it, 10 or 15 years ago. So that's really where they're going to. But the question is that's very expensive. A lot of boomers are in at 3% or below 4%. And you're going, the numbers just don't add up. So what I call it is aging in place. and it's a long game solution for inventory, and that's the boomers, because it's prior to the millennials, it was the biggest demographic population segment that we had in this country, and so all that shelter was created for them. And so the problem is that now the millennials, who were like, oh, we're not going to be like the boomers, and they weren't for 5 years, and they go, oh, you know what? Those boomers were right. We need to buy a house. And so now they are the largest demographic segment in there, and they want the boomers housing. But guess what? The boomers ain't giving it up, baby.
They're not moving.
No.
They're not moving.
No. So the long game, eventually Father Time will win. And so those houses will come on the market, and people will go into Searstone and any of the assisted living centers there. So, but it's not going to be like this 5, 10, 20, 30% increase in inventory. I mean, some people have called it a silver tsunami. I don't see that happening. I just don't. I mean, you may go look to the bigger subdivisions where, now there's 5 houses for sale. You may have 7, you may have 8, but you're not going to go from 5 to 25, which is really what needs to happen in order to satisfy the demand of housing that's out there.
So what in terms you told me that the job market's blessed, which I agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a particular sector of the job market that you're seeing is in more need than another?
Well,
here?
tech. I mean, it's crazy how especially this state, if you go back and you look at the history of this state, which started out as agricultural and started out as furniture manufacturing, it's totally flipped now. So it's what I call, and other people call it, a knowledge-based economy. And so one of the draws for a knowledge-based economy is the students they produce, which is our schools here. And then so that's the draw that Apple has here. So if you need people, and look, if everything's tech, right? Everything needs coding to it. Everything needs hardware engineering. So, and now you talk about artificial intelligence. So all that stuff is, the schools here are graduating students with that skill set.
Right.
And so that's where the demand is coming from. Now, back to the agriculture and furniture, it's just not, ag's probably a little bit less than what it was. Furniture, if you drive through Greensboro, you can see it's significantly less than what it was. So the state has had a total flip in terms of its economy.
That's interesting as well. A lot of people don't understand the Triangle area. I mean, people watch from all over the country. They don't necessarily understand it, but it's really the three schools: Duke, UNC Chapel Hill, NC State, and we create this. And I remember, moving here, I guess, 30 plus years ago when I moved here. I guess I'm almost a native. I'm just about 10 years behind you. And I remember the number of, I guess, businesses that we had in the Research Triangle Park, the RTP at the time, was somewhere between 300 and 340. Is that number pretty stable, or where are we at now?
I don't have an answer to that, but what I do find fascinating is that RTP, which was designed back in the 60s as the ultimate, you go here, you come home, and you go here, and then you go home, you go back and forth, but there's nothing else there. All it is commercial space and industrial space. And now what they're doing is they're reimagining the whole park, because knowledge workers don't have, unless you're building something in a factory, knowledge workers can work anywhere they want in the world.
Sure.
And so they're reimagining Research Triangle Park in terms of saying, okay, well, you don't need to have this office where people go in to work every day. So what do we do with that office space? Well, you reimagine it. You either tear it down and you put apartments and condos and townhouses or whatever. You give it more of a live, work, play feel, like you see in North Hills here. And so it's fascinating, because that was held up throughout the world as like the thing to aspire to have. And we're still the benefits today of that, right? That's it's not like this antique that's out there. Today, what started in the 60s, we're still seeing the benefits of today. They're smart enough to realize that they're not going to dig their heels in the ground and say, this is the way we're doing it. No, they've recognized that work from home has changed so much, and you have this giant piece of land in the middle of everywhere, and you need to repurpose it. And you have this huge demand for shelter. Here it is. There's the answer right there.
Right.
So.
I know that it's called the T.A.R.R report, which is residential real estate report. But I can't help but think that the commercial real estate market affects us too in the residential real estate area. How much do you look at that in terms of how the commercial real estate affects the residential real estate piece?
Work from home again. Just driving in here and looking at all these big office buildings, and I'm not sure what the vacancy rate is, but it's high.
It's high, yeah.
And so that's so you don't go into the office, you work from home, but the landlord needs his check, and the company signed a lease. So there's the tension going on right now. I got a buddy of mine who's over in London for a couple of weeks, and we were talking about work from home. And he said, the Euros, and I've read this too, they can't wait to get back to the office. And the difference between them and us is their shelter is very small, but a lot of us, me included, have designed some really, really, really neat home office spaces. Right. And you ain't getting me out of there.
I know. I get it. I get it.
So that being said, it does two things. It increases the demand for residential housing from people here and from people moving in from out.
Mm.
And it also makes us sit on our house, because if I got to move, I got to find something that I can replicate my office space to. And I don't see anything out there that can do that. So another headwind for resale housing.
All right. So we're coming close to the end of our time.
Okay.
So I wrote this to you. I said, what are the top 3 things that you think people should know based on the data that you collect for the T.A.R.R report? What do you think of the top 3 things that people should know in our area?
Well, you want to be like, what should we be looking for next year?
Yeah, let's do that.
Let's do that. Because that's typically what I guess. So, and well,
let's be typical.
Right. Okay. Well, there's nothing there. None of these well, you can control what you do on a daily basis, right? Sure. You speak to that. So, but there's a lot of things out there that are not in our control that they need to pay attention to. So mortgage rates. You can take your pick in terms of what news source or economist or anybody you want to listen to in terms of what interest rates are going to do next year. The common thread right now is we're going to see lower interest rates next year. So it's a good news, bad news thing, right? If you couldn't afford a house at 8% and interest rates go back to the 6s, in theory, you should be able to afford a house now. So that gets you out of the apartment. The bad news is, though, I don't see any increase. The inventory increase that we're going to see in 2024 is going to be about the same as it is in 2023, maybe a little bit different. So, hey, if you're out there, remember the COVID first, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter, 2021. The crazy multiple offers. I mean, Linda lived through that. I think the record I heard was like 150 offers on one house. I mean, it's just, that stuff was not enjoyable for anybody.
Right.
And I'm not going to say that's going to happen again, but if you went from like 150 offers on one house to 25 offers on one house, that's still not an enjoyable transaction.
No.
So that's really, be careful what you ask for, NAR and everybody in mortgage lending community. It's just like, we don't really have, anything that you do to pour gasoline on demand. We don't need that. And yet, not that it's in our control, but that's one of the things. So pay attention to that. Pay attention to the level of resales. Each market, we have so many different sub-markets. Inventory is crucially important. We didn't have the principal substitution, which is an appraisal phase, saying that, you look at a bunch of apples, you pick the apple with the lowest price. Coming out of COVID, they did not have that. You had a silent auction bidding pricing market, which wasn't fun for anybody. But now the principal substitution is in play. So pay attention to new construction, the prices of new construction, because new construction, if you've got a 2-year-old house, a 5-year-old house, a 20-year-old house, a 50-year-old house, new construction is in play. It is a principle of substitution, and and a lot of people don't really get that, but it is. So pay attention to what new home builders are doing. They're out there right now with offering some serious cash incentives to move their houses. So I'd say mortgage rates, pay attention to the level of resale inventory, and pay attention to pricing alternatives that new home builders are doing. Because we have, I don't know what the percentage is, but Lennar and Pulte, probably the 2 biggest builders in the country, a very large market share here. So when they do stuff, it goes down the line and affects everybody.
You've been awesome, by the way, as always. Thank you. I can't wait to bring you back. I feel like this is one of the most enjoyable 30 minutes I have with you.
It goes by like that.
And it goes by so fast.
Right.
And this is a question because I'm going to have you tell people how to get a hold of you.
Right.
But can anybody subscribe to the T.A.R.R? They do that.
They can contact me. You figure out a way to put your my email address on there.
Yeah, I'll put your email address on the write-up. Yeah,
right.
I'll do that. Yeah, but tell them, what is your email address?
So it's first name. I got to spell it, right?
Yeah, I know you got to spell it.
Stacey Afindsen at gmail.com. So STACEYANFINDSEN@gmail.com. So yeah, that's the best way to get up. And look, I get a lot of people that move here and a lot of people that go someplace and they go, why don't you do it here? We don't have that. And look, I've been blessed to do it. It's a data hunter gatherer nirvana for me. but really the whole purpose of it is it's to get out. Like it doesn't do me any good to know all this stuff. I got to write it. And then my subscribers have to go to their buyers and their sellers, their customers and their clients and say, this is what's going on. Because the constant challenge that I have is conveying to practitioners how important it is to stay up to date on what's going on, because artificial intelligence is coming at it hard and fast. And if you want to put yourself out of a job, just don't pay attention to what's going on in the market. You've spoken about this. When you get up each day, you're going to say, how am I going to create value today? What am I going to do to create value? And this is one resource to do it. And I think that's both you and I are making that same pitch. I don't know how many people, we wish more people would get up each day and say, how am I going to create value today? But therefore, that's what successful people do. That's what do I do? What's my special sauce? And so
that's awesome. Thank you. You've been great.
Good.
Folks, it's the show. I say this to you all the time. You had a lot of choices. You chose us. Thank you for doing that. Give us a thumbs up on YouTube. Wherever you're listening to the show, on your favorite podcast player, why don't you give us a 5-star positive review as well? You know what? We thank you so much for being here. We're going to see you next week. Another great show, another great guest. As I say to you all over the world, you know what that is. Ciao